This is the Clean Energy Show with Brian Stockton and James Whittingham.
Hello and welcome to episode 61 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
I'm James Whittingham. This week, North America's largest electric bus fleet gets larger. Washington State bans new gas cars by 2030. Hydro dams as giant batteries. And I unveil a brand new segment. The EV of the Week. Brian Stockton, good day to you.
Yes, hello. I didn't know we were doing a new segment this week.
I like to surprise. Yes. I've been thinking about it for a long time. People who listen to our show are EV curious, and I thought I would highlight a new EV every week, or AEV every week, and give sort of a summary of them, because people really don't know what's out there. And a lot of people who listen to our show aren't overly immersed in this stuff. They're kind of getting introduced to it by people like us in our show. So I thought we would do that. The Cadillac Lyriq has just been announced. And because my brother-in-law buys such a vehicle and may ask me about it, I decided to feature that this week so I can do my research and have it done. So how are you doing? We have no Vax chat this week.
No, nothing new to update for Vaxes. No.
My brother-in-law, though, in question, lives south of Calgary, and his daughter, who's off in college or something, came back and gave them COVID, or at least they thought they did. She had COVID positive, and they were feeling mild flu symptoms. They've had the AstraZeneca vaccine about a month ago, and they were feeling mild flu symptoms, but they got negative tests today. So I don't know what that's about. I think if it was me, I'd be scared too. I think they're still in quarantine because a household contact has COVID. But
yeah, well, I've certainly heard of other people getting, like a common cold. And,
really?
Yeah, I'd be scared silly if I got a common cold. But everybody's like, oh, no, it's just a cold. And they get tested for COVID and it's negative. And but yeah, that'd be the scariest thing.
My partner's been tested twice from mild symptoms. So, but I don't think they're actual colds. I just think they're, in my partner's case, not getting enough sleep for a week and just, every little draft of air causing a problem. So I don't know. I mean, I'm feeling pretty optimistic, even though things are going to crap here where we live in Canada and we're worse than the United States now. Do you feel different having the vaccine in you? Do you feel less worried, less anything?
Well, finally now, yes, because it's been exactly 2 weeks since I got my first shot. So yeah, 10 days, 14 days, that's when you're supposed to start getting some protection. So yes, I think like just yesterday, I started to feel a bit more at ease.
Yeah, me too. Which I highly recommend. And I still enjoy watching other people get shots. I still can't get enough of that. When I've been trying to help friends and with my vaccine expertise, because I've been so obsessed with it that I can detect trends, Brian, in the vaccine lines. And yeah. Now, I had a friend in Vancouver who went to a couple of pharmacies because they just announced it. And they said, no, we don't know what you're talking about. And he eventually went all the way across town to another pharmacy and got lucky and got one in 5 minutes. And he's happy. So, yeah, That sort of stories makes me happy. And, So there's some weird things going on this week with Tesla. So let's just get them out of the way. Now, there's probably things that we shouldn't talk about because they're stupid. But everyone's talking about them, so we should talk about them because everyone else is talking about them. And that brings me to our regular segment. What do you think?
What do you think?
I'm going to start with the Chinese Tesla incident. Let's call it that. The Chinese Tesla incident. They face a backlash after an unhappy customer crashes the Shanghai Motor Show booth. And what struck me, Brian, I didn't look at this too closely, but a bunch of people came with umbrellas and unfurled the umbrellas. I don't know if you read this, to block the view of the person who was dissenting. And I don't think they were the Chinese government. It was accused of being Tesla. This is just something you do in China when someone freaks out. You get umbrellas and block their view because everyone has cameras. So they were a dissatisfied customer, and I don't know exactly why, but Tesla has apologized today, and they don't really have a PR firm in China. I'm sure they have intergovernmental relations people, but
Yeah, I don't know too much about it, but yeah, somebody was upset because it was, I believe, her father that was driving the car and crashed the car. And the claim was that the brakes weren't working. And as far as anybody knows, it was investigated and it was, determined to be driver error. So, but, anytime there's an accident with a car, it's obviously very sad. And this is definitely obviously impacted this person's family enough to go protest. So who knows if there's any substance to it, but obviously they feel strongly enough to do what they did at the auto show.
It seems like these incidents are happening a lot with Teslas. And remember when Toyota had their little problem? That was actually a mat getting pushed forward and stuck on the little tube that the accelerator pedal pushes down on, and it was sort of jamming it in place. So my cars have little actual connectors to hook in those mats so they don't move.
Yeah.
And it's very involved now.
Yeah, I used to have that problem with a car where the mat would shift. And I've got two stories to add to that. I used to own a Nissan Sentra, and there was a weird sort of bug with that car. I'd be driving down the highway on cruise control, and I would sort of, I would rest my right foot kind of not by the pedals because you're on cruise control. And, the little lever that you pull up to pull the seat forward and backward?
Yeah.
It sort of stuck out like there was a post.
Okay.
I think now they do them as a closed loop because I think they've realized, this is a potential problem. So this stick, and I would put my foot underneath, and the shoes I had at the time, they were running shoes, and they had a loop on the back of them that you could pull your shoes on with. And so the loop would go over this post, and I'd go to move my foot back to the pedals, and I'd realize my foot was trapped. And, but, I don't know. I figured it out, and I think I ended up cutting the loop on my shoes so that it wouldn't happen again.
Wow. That's comical.
Yeah.
In a cartoon.
And then the other story I have about this, way back in the 1970s, there was a huge automotive story to do with Audi in the U.S. Audi had this problem with unintended acceleration. And this problem crops up every few years. And it's also cropped up with Tesla in recent years, where somebody will say, yeah, I was just parking my car in the driveway and suddenly it lurched forward and drove into the wall. Well, the first company to really get in trouble with that was Audi. And it was really bad. Like, it kind of destroyed Audi in America for many years, I think, because it was the Audi 5000, I think, was the model. And it just was this thing that started with one incident, and then there was momentum, and all these people kept saying, sudden unintended acceleration. And as far as I know, it was determined that, Audi had nothing wrong with their cars, but this is just a thing that happens every once in a while. People push the accelerator when they think they're pushing the brake. Mm-hmm. And, once it starts getting planted in the public consciousness, other people, oh, I have an Audi, I had the same thing. And then, before you know it, it almost put them out of business. But, as far as I recall, it was eventually determined to be completely unfounded. And of course, Tesla can counter these claims because they have data on all of their cars. It's constantly streaming out data. So I guess you have to trust them that they're, telling us the data accurately. But of course, yeah, in a Tesla, you can just go to going to the black box to determine if the brake or the accelerator was the one that was pressed.
Yeah, they can't get that data out fast enough because the Wall Street Journal will pick up on it and write a negative Tesla story. And there's just their problem and a thorn in the side of Elon, I think, for sure. And it's just, it happens all the time. It happens here. You see an old person drive into a storefront a couple of times a year in Regina, in a small city that we live in. Teslas, you would think, might amplify that because you have so much torque and acceleration from the get-go that one little mistake that may have been recoverable in another car, suddenly you're in the living room watching TV from the driver's seat. So,
and of course, Tesla dissolved their PR teams sometime earlier this year. And so, yeah, there's sort of two schools of thought. It's like, well, they're such a large company. They probably should have a PR person. But the way these news cycles move so quickly, I don't think it would have help them. Like there was just an instant spate of negative news stories. And instead of just actually, waiting for investigations to be completed, there's an immediate news hit. Somebody says something negative, and before you know it, it's wildly amplified, and then Tesla can eventually release the data or whatever and counteract that. But I don't know, it seems to be this unending problem with Tesla because, their cars statistically are far safer. There's far fewer accidents. There's far fewer deaths. But it seems to be the only deaths that ever get reported on the news.
So with full self-driving going to be expanded, I would think that they would have a emergency task force response team, a SEAL Team 7, if you will, of Tesla employees ready to get that data as fast as possible, analyze that data as fast as possible, and then respond publicly. As well as make adjustments if it is ever their fault, and it probably will be one day. There'll be something that can be learned from an autopilot or a full self-driving incident. And then when that rolls out to actual robotaxis, I think, they've said publicly, Elon has said publicly that there's going to be accidents. It's just, you have to educate the public, and it's impossible sometimes to educate the public. They see robo-car accident. They don't realize that actually that same technology has saved 20 lives, and when it may take one eventually too, or at least it may not even be the vehicle's fault. It just might have been unavoidable. But anyway, speaking of which, there was a supposed autopilot crash in Texas where both victims were in the back seat, and the police were adamant about this, that they were in the back seat. Did you read about that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's one was in the passenger seat and
Okay.
one was in the back seat,
Right.
and they both died, ran into a tree. It was a very short drive from the house, but I think there's really nothing to be said. Like none of us, like you said, these stories are kind of dumb. Like none of us should really be talking about this until some kind of investigation is done, because there were just lots of weird questions. Like if there was no one driving, how did they even get the car started? It's all very strange.
And people have been driving down the highway like that, right? But Elon pointed out that it wouldn't be really possible to engage the autopilot without lines on the road, because they're just in a residential bay or something starting out. And so it's weird, and it creates so much negative press.
Yeah, the latest speculation I heard is that maybe they were able to engage the cruise control. Like just being able to set the cruise control is a little bit easier.
Uh-huh.
So perhaps they engaged that, but didn't engage the auto steering. And so they somehow got the cruise control on and up to 60 miles an hour, and the car took off. So I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
And regardless of how they've done it, if they weren't in the driver's seat paying attention, it's not Tesla's fault in any way, shape, or form.
No.
It's not designed to do that.
It's very clear. It's a driver assist feature. Like every other car that has driver assist features, it's still the responsibility of the driver. And, it'll be this way for a long time.
And yet it's still bad press, right? I mean, it's still negative coverage, even though it's clearly impossible to be Tesla's fault.
Yeah, but, I've come to actually appreciate the bad press, because I realized, it depressed the stock for so long. Like there was 5 whole years there where Tesla's stock really didn't move. And I think a lot of it was due to an endless stream of negative press, but it allowed me to get in and buy the stock when it was still kind of low. So, I have a newfound appreciation. If there's some FUD out there that's not really true, it can be a good day to buy the stock.
Yes, I've been kind of waiting for that too. We'll see. There's going to be days like that. You just know it. Save your money. Wait for the FUD. And do you want to explain to our newbie listeners what FUD is?
Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And it is, it just applies to negative press freely for any company. And, particularly companies that are fighting against things like the fossil fuel industry, which has such a large capitalization and lots of money and lots of power. And so, Tesla has been the frequent victim of fear, uncertainty, and doubt spread through, rumors and legitimate news often.
Brian, North America's largest electric bus fleet is getting larger.
Yeah, so this is the TTC, the Toronto Transit Commission. You and I both lived in Toronto once upon a time, and they are apparently already the North America's largest electric bus fleet, and they're going to spend another $300 million to expand the fleet. So 300 electric buses that they're going to add to the existing 60 buses. So yeah, they're already the largest. Going to spend another $300 million. They have a few hybrid buses in the mix as well. And, yeah, this is going to all happen by 2025. They should have 300 of these buses in service. So a bit of a slow rollout, but yeah, it's a big deal.
You buy them as you retire buses. I think that's kind of how that works. I'm looking forward to the first electric bus in Regina. We don't have a hybrid bus. Saskatoon, our sister city of sorts, up north, a couple of hours, is hybrid buses and is buying electric buses. Edmonton, which is colder than us, if that's possible, is buying a lot of electric buses. So yeah, I just really look forward to them. When I walk every night, I walk on a bus route, and the bus passes me by, and it's noisy and it's stinky. I would say more stinky than noisy, because it's kind of coasting through the neighborhood. Usually where I am, it's not accelerating, but it's just one of those things. Sort of regenerative braking will take pressure off those squeaky brakes all the time, those air brakes. So you'll be able to, it's just a nice fit. The starting and stopping, the city driving is a really good fit. And we've got programs nationally for school buses. So I hope to see those, because those, Brian Stockton, stink worse than any bus there is. And then we put our children on them.
No, and I'm a big fan of all the electric streetcars in Toronto, which have basically always been electric. They use the overhead wires, and it's just such a pleasant way to travel. As you say, the diesel stuff is just noisy and smelly, and it's terrible.
Yes, and they're testing out an electric train in the United States, a battery electric train, this week as well. I don't have that information in front of me, but there's a European company that's made the train, and they're going to test it out on a normal diesel train line and just see how it works. And see if it can, it's a passenger train, so it's less of a load, unless you're hauling a bunch of me's, in which case very heavy. Yeah. But it's very lighter compared to cargo, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Anyway, Washington State is banning new gas cars in 9 years, less than 9 years. Let's call it 8 and change.
Yeah, so this has now become the earliest of the bans for U.S. states. I think California was 2035. So Washington's going to one-up them and say 2030, banning new gas car sales. So I don't know. Weren't we going to come up with a segment for this? Or, I don't know, banning date segment, or I don't know what you call it.
Yes, we should have. I should have done that.
This is happening every single week. And every week, of course, there's announcements about new battery factories and new, Volkswagen had a story about, they've announced they now have capacity for 600,000 battery systems per year. So I think that's close to, Tesla sold 500,000 cars this past year. So VW says they now have capacity for 600,000 battery systems per year. So this is all ramping up. There was a interview I saw with Kathy Wood from ARK Invest, and she's always talking about these kinds of disruptive innovations. And she was predicting, there's only about 2 million electric cars sold. She's predicting it could be as much as 40 million electric cars by 2035. So this is what's going to allow these bans to actually work. Like, there has to be the cars for people to purchase. So we're at the beginning of that S curve. This is really, really going to take off.
How do you feel about that, though? Because I feel like there's a shortage. Like, they're only sending the cars to the zero EV, the ZEV markets, which Canada may become one, by the way. I was going to ask you about that.
The new federal budget.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't.
Was there, because they were kind of vague, in my opinion.
That's the thing. Yeah, I kind of had that on my list of things to talk about, Canada's federal budget. And other than promising lots of green initiatives, the details are kind of vague. And so I think we'll kind of have to wait until there's more specifics before we really kind of dive into that.
Yeah, I find it frustrating because it's a big tease, like they tell you that they're going to do something, but they're not saying what. There doesn't seem to be any change in the rebate for electric cars, which is $5,000 for us right now. Although I think I've heard talk about tax incentives for used EVs. Did you hear that one? That was sort of mentioned.
Again, it's not, until we can see the actual program, it's all just chatter.
Right. So the battery electric train is in New York State, by the way. They're going to be the first in North America with a battery-powered commuter train, and it's the Long Island Railroad. First commuter train in North America with nearly $1 million train. So that's cool. I always like that. I wish the passenger shuttle service in Toronto between the airport and it's quite a few kilometers long, and it's diesel.
Yeah, the Up Express. It's only been open for a few years, but that was, controversial when they decided to go with diesel for that because it's, new infrastructure. They should have gone electric, but I guess, they could convert to battery-powered trains in the future.
It's greener and quieter, this train, by the way, and it can be recharged on sections that have a third rail. So they do have a electrified third rail. So that's cool. That's just...
and I guess you don't need the third rail everywhere. You just need it maybe in places where it, can charge. And I wanted to mention too, British Columbia, our westernmost province, announced their budget, which included $500 million in green investments to reduce emissions, clean energy investments. And apparently BC is now the fastest growing EV jurisdiction in North America. That's where electric vehicles are really taking
It's
off.
the new California. They've got a mild climate. They've got lots of socially conscious people. Prices have come down. This is a place where they're having trouble building superchargers for the Tesla network fast enough because suddenly when the Model 3 came out, everyone bought one. And then they didn't have enough chargers anymore, and they had to scramble. And now you see them opening 2 or 3 stations at a time now, catching up. It doesn't take too long to do that, but they do have to catch up sometimes. Brian, I wanted to talk about how I learned something this week by listening to other podcasts, okay? So I was fascinated and blown away that a hydro dam can be used as battery storage. And that is without... Because the first time I ever heard about hydro as storage, it was the Hoover Dam, which I was visiting at the time. They were talking about having this huge project in California to pump water during the day with solar upstream to the high end of the dam, and then let that flow through at a higher rate at night when the solar is not providing electricity. And I thought, that's kind of crude because it is a beautiful place, and they'd have to run all these pipes and things and pumps. But that's water storage. That's hydro storage, whether it's a lake at the top of a hill that you create or put there and then let it come down at night. That is hydro storage. But you can use hydro as storage without that, and that's what's new to me. The deal is that you just turn off the dam, so to speak. I didn't mean to say that, but it came out funny. You turn off the dam, and the water builds up because you don't need the dam because you've got so much solar. We're not there now, but in the future, we'll be able to use all the hydro dams in BC and Quebec and Manitoba, in Canada, for example, and other places in the world as a battery storage just by turning them off, and then you let them run at night or when the wind's not blowing or whatever. So I thought that was cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and you could certainly plan, I would think, it's a sunny day, so we're going to, cut back our hydro during the day and open it up at night. Or it's like, it's going to be a half cloudy day. So, you could just adjust the amount of, water that you're putting through. That's great.
And there's a Alberta company, which is, this is a farmer who used to have oil wells on his property. And they got abandoned, of course, which is a big problem. There's thousands of abandoned wells in Alberta.
It's a huge problem.
I think 3,000 just in that Canadian province. And we have them here. Wow. And as things shift in the oil industry, there's going to be more abandoned wells. It's inevitable. And the companies that go out of business, the little companies that get the wells going and they don't clean them up, and the government is going to have to pay for them. So that's going to be, we don't talk about that, but that's, when they talk about small scale nuclear and things like that, they don't talk about the disposal. The disposal is not in the price.
Well, yeah. And even when the oil industry is doing well, they don't seem to clean up their wells. Again, no pun intended. But, so once they start doing poorly, how bad is it going to be?
Yeah. And it's on us, the taxpayer, to take care of that if they don't do that. So he had this idea, and he's doing a test experiment and started a little company and got the grants. The things that abandoned wells have already is infrastructure. They have a road built, and roads are not cheap. You know that. To build a road on a farm, the oil company has already built that road, and it's built it to withstand trucks with oil on it, heavy trucks. So it's a well-built road, and they also have high-voltage electricity lines running to those wells to power them. So that is a perfect place. You don't have to, building transmission from a solar project, which is why all the ones in Saskatchewan, where we live, are built right near power switching stations. So they're going to be building them near there. So they don't have to pay that extra money. Well, these things exist.
Yeah, and it's true. I think that we will need upgraded grid in certain other places once we start, moving to more, especially where we live. It's a very rural place. And so, a lot of farmhouses have to be serviced with electricity and those grids may need to be upgraded. And there was a discussion online. Apparently, like the 5G cellular networks use a ton of power.
Is that right?
So something like that is a struggle again for a place like where we live, because it's sparse population. And, the current cell towers might only have a certain amount of electrical service, and, it's going to need to be upgraded because the 5G towers use so much more power, apparently.
I know that in northern Saskatchewan, where they don't have power, they're actually using solar and battery storage to power the towers because they can't run electricity.
Already, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's really cool. And, I thought that's really neat, because I think what they're talking about is smaller scale solar farms. Like if you have an open grid where you can sell to the grid and your neighbor is doing irrigation, when there's a lot of irrigation in that province, you can sell the electricity to them at a lower price because it's solar and it's competitive and used during the day, when irrigation can be used during the day. Although I think night is better, but I think you have to monitor it. So they do it during the day. I'm not an expert, Brian. I'm not an expert. I'm not you. You're an expert on everything. A world-renowned expert on a lot of things. Yes. You know what, though? I'm learning things every week, and we have an email here that I wanted to read to you, because this is talking about what I learned on podcasts this week, other podcasts. And he says, "Hi, guys. I'm a Minnesotan who listens to the Clean Energy Show for quite some time now. We had a Nissan Leaf and just recently moved up to a Tesla. I'm part of a group called voteclimate.org. That is vote-climate.org. And we are working on putting info out about climate and energy-related podcasts. I'm compiling a list of climate change podcasts, and your shows are certainly on the list. I wonder if you have recommendations for any other podcasts worth adding to the list. Thank you in advance, Chris Prentice. Thank you in advance, Chuck Prentice. Thank you, Chuck. Very kind of you to write us. There's nothing that makes us happier, Brian, than when people send us a letter. Just to get that out of the way. That's just the best.
It's the best.
And I really do appreciate all the letters that come in. So I happen to listen to Markham Hislop's podcast, Energy Talks, energy with an I at the end. He's on YouTube as well as on the podcast, and what makes him interesting to me is it has a local perspective. So I've gotten a greater understanding about the politics involved in the oil industry in Canada, because we're sort of surrounded by the oil industry here, and there's a hostility to that against green energy. So that's a local, but he's always got experts on for like 5 to 8 minutes at a time, and just everything from Teslas to EVs to batteries to oil stuff. He's a longtime oil journalist. So that's one thing that I listen to.
And I tend to watch him on YouTube, but is the podcast the same or different?
The podcast, I believe, is the same. And also, The Energy Gang is one of the biggest podcasts there is on energy and climate. I think one of them left recently to go work for the Biden administration. They can be a little bit into the weeds, and maybe that's not appropriate for some of our listeners who are new to green energy. But yeah, it's interesting, and depending on the topic, it's actually one of the few other climate shows that have relaxed and entertaining discussions. Not as entertaining as us, but they're smarter than us.
I mean, clearly we're the best.
Yes, I mean, is there anything else? That's the question here. So,
yeah.
Thank you very much, Chuck from Minnesota. We appreciate that. Now I got hassled by Don in Toronto about the car purchase that I want to make. Don's all over me on this. He says Tesla is really lowballing their trade-ins out here. They gave me an example of a screenshot. Is that something they do? They don't give you great trade-in value when you're trading in your Tesla at Tesla, right? They're worse than a car dealership.
Yeah, they have a reputation for lowballing the trade-ins, which is unfortunate.
So basically, you got to where we live. I don't know if it's like this everywhere, but where we live, you're basically getting retail price for selling your used Tesla, even if it's a year old. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, there's a handful of used Teslas around, and yeah, they're pretty much selling for the retail price. It's crazy.
And there's been some examples where they're more than the retail price, which is, maybe it's a negotiation tactic, but there just aren't Teslas on car dealerships where we live yet. I mean, there are, but there's so few of them that it's such a new thing that they thought that they could lowball or, I don't know. Would you trade in your car to Tesla if you were upgrading, say, to a Y tomorrow?
Well, I'd have to see. Maybe they give you a better price on a Tesla trade-in. I don't know, but if it's a gas car trade-in, they're going to give you a very
well. That's what he's talking about as a Tesla trade-in. He was giving me examples of terrible Tesla trade-ins, so he thinks they're going to sell for not very much. So perhaps there's a chance to choose an electric car that you could own forever for the same price as a platform car with added batteries. The ID4 is not as big a failure as the ID3, but I'm sure you've seen Sandy Munro's reaction. I saw Sandy Munro's reaction, and he was just a cantankerous old man, not being able to use the touchscreen the way he expected to. So I think he just made up his mind early. And yeah, I understand some of the engineering criticisms he's had, but it's VW.
Yeah, I wasn't particularly swayed by his cantankerousness because, every car has its own unique quirks, and if you own it, you just get used to those. So, it seemed to me everything he was complaining about were things that you would just get used to.
So yeah, it's my partner who will need to buy a car a year from now. And she grew up poor. So she likes to have a new car. And there's high competition at the workplace. They're all married. We're not married. So she, there's pressure for that too. It's just so much pressure. The other women, they're married. Their husbands have jobs that earn money, that bring in an income. Yeah, it's
like that episode of the Flintstones, the Frederick episode.
Everything in life has a Flintstones episode. Most of you probably don't remember the Flintstones. I don't know. What's our average age? We don't have that data. So obviously it's her choice, he says, and comforting and reliable. Yeah. So I don't know. The problem is we're 2-3 years away from having a good used EV market or a decent used EV market. I mean, that's the thing you do, right? You buy a 2-year-old car. That's what people do. They get most of the depreciation out of the way and go from there, right?
Yeah, you could maybe look at like Chevy Bolt, like those have been around for a few years now. So you could maybe, there's a few used Chevy Bolts around.
Mm-hmm. I was also thinking about a used Volt. The latest generation of Volt it's a plug-in hybrid, but it goes for like 70 or 80 kilometers, and that's even in cold weather. Like it'll heat the cabin in cold weather. Yeah, I don't know. So we'll see.
And I will mention, too, that the Volkswagen ID4 just won World Car of the Year for 2021 from the International World Car Awards, whatever that is. It sounds like it's a bunch of journalists, but that's, that's something. I think it's a decent. I still think it's a decent car. I'm not swayed by the
I
negative
take
comment.
it Sandy Monroe wasn't on the jury.
Yeah.
Well, I have to sit in one. I have to drive one, right? I mean, we'd have to. I mean, we're talking, just I don't know. I'm gonna get. You know what? This is just gonna get me more email. Everybody's gonna give me advice.
Here's the thing about test driving. I don't know. I feel like I can't properly decide, a 10-minute, even a half-hour test drive. You really have to live with the car for a while. So I don't put too much stock in a test drive. It's like buying shoes. Like I bought some running shoes last year and you try them on in the store
Yeah.
and you walk around the store and you're like, oh yeah, these seem fine. And then you wear them for 2 days and it's like, oh man, these are actually really tight in the, in a part of the, it's hard to tell from a test drive or just walking around the store with some
Brian,
shoes.
I've never said this before on the show, but I have problem feet.
Yes, I'm well aware of your problem feet.
I have problem feet, and that's why I constantly wear runners with orthotics in them. And people just think that, well, I am a slob, but I mean, sometimes slobs don't have a choice. I can't wear nice shoes. I'd like to. I envy people who can wear nice shoes and just walk around in comfort. I can't do that. Also, the EV road tax that we were talking about. We are the first jurisdiction here where Brian and I live in North America, in Canada, to do it. Saskatchewan government has proposed a $150 EV road tax for the 400 EVs in this province to come up with $16,000. And Mark Croker says, I plan to renew my plates the day before it comes into effect. That way I can avoid it for 1 year. I should do that too.
Oh, that's a clever idea.
I've heard that from a few people.
Yeah, I never thought of that.
I've heard that from a few people. Just to stick it to the man. I mean, we're all a community here. There's so few of us. We can all get together and say, hey, right now I'm on a month-to-month basis, but I could walk in there the day before and say, yeah, let's renew it for a year.
Yeah, let's do that and prepay for the year. That's a great idea.
Screw it. Stick it to the man. Good. Thanks for your comment, Mark. Brian, coming up soon is the lightning round, where we'll clean up all the headlines from the week. And, but right now we have an exciting new feature, the EV of the week.
Nice. Very nice.
Thank you. If there's any professional voiceover artists who would like to contribute to our show and have your own equipment, drop me a line. cleanenergyshow@gmail.com or on Twitter, cleanenergypod, one word, on Twitter. Get a hold of us. We'd love to hear from you. And also, you can leave us a voicemail message at speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow. So our EV of the week this week, Brian, I can't guarantee that we'll have one every week. I think we could, but I can't guarantee it.
Yeah, well, there is often, announcements of new cars that I don't always bother with, especially luxury cars, ironically.
Yes.
Because you don't like talking about luxury cars, but here we are talking about a luxury car.
That's because my brother-in-law, like my partner, grew up poor, so he buys Cadillacs. From a small town in Saskatchewan, works in the oil industry, likes his Cadillacs. Cadillacs make me puke. I hate the styling of Cadillacs. I hate the Americanized old white man opulence of them, and and also the least reliable cars on the market year after year after year. Come on, if you pay at a premium price, they should be more reliable. Don't make me take my blood pressure again, Brian. Anyway, so I'm not a Cadillac fan, okay? But GM makes Cadillacs, and GM has a history. By the way, it's 25 years since the EV1 came out. Did you know that?
No, that's a long time.
Yeah, the EV1 is the first mass-produced electric car. Kind of funny looking. Late 90s. Danny DeVito bought one. The subject of Who Killed the Electric Car, the remarkable documentary on that, where they crushed them all after they wouldn't let people keep them or buy them. After the leases ended, they crushed them all. I never understood why. So GM has a history of that. They have the Bolt and the Volt before that. Came out about the same time as the Leaf, the first generation of mass-produced electric cars. So they know what they're doing. So they're unveiling the Cadillac Lyriq, Lyriq. It has 300 miles of range or 480 kilometers of range. And it's weird because I saw something over 500 listed as well. So I'm a little unclear as to, I think it might have been an automotive journalist just making a mistake in the conversion or something. But it does have a 100 kilowatt battery pack, which is comparable to Tesla Model S, right? It's about as big as they get now, 100 kilowatt pack. So it probably means that it's a little less efficient, but it is a bigger and heavier vehicle. It's not a small vehicle, Brian. It's a fairly good-sized vehicle. It's bigger. It's an SUV that's bigger than most we've seen in the EV marketplace so far. I think it might even be considered mid-size. So 50 kilometers of range per hour with a standard onboard charger for level 2 charging at home, which is pretty good. But you can upgrade that to 19.2 kilowatt hour, a 19.2 kilowatt charger, which is as big. I haven't heard of a bigger home charger than 19.2. You'd probably have to have some special wiring for that. And a lot of people may not be able to even take advantage of that depending on how they're tied to the grid, but that's a big charger for home. And so that's big. And 52 miles or 87 kilometers per hour in your driveway with that 19.2. So that's 87 kilometers in an hour in your driveway.
Yeah, I would argue that the 19.2 kilowatt charger is probably unnecessary. As we've discussed many times, you really charge your EV at home overnight. So, I don't think you need your home charging to be that fast.
I have 3.3 kilowatts charging, and I have a small battery of like a 20, probably the equivalent of a 20 kilowatt hour battery, a fifth of that size. And I find that I would have liked to have more than 3.3 kilowatt charging twice a year. And I live in Canada where it gets really cold, like not even normal Canada, the cold parts of Canada, that minus 40 part of Canada. So there's only a couple times a year that I wish I had more. And I could have even had 6.6 on if I bought the upgraded trim level of that Nissan Leaf in 2013. So yeah, but I would, and seven's a good number, and the 7 point something is a good number. That's what you have, isn't it?
Yeah, mine's about 7.5 kilowatts. That seems plenty.
Yeah. So what is that? That's I get 25 kilometers an hour in the summer, so you would get more than 50, right?
Yeah, it's about 55 kilometers an hour charging.
Yeah, that's more than you need. You probably never need it because you have a big battery. I mean, you probably never really need it. Like, I have to wait another half hour before I get some more kilometers before I go to the grocery store. You would never be in that situation, I don't think.
No, the only time is if we're going on a road trip and we want to charge it up to 100%.
Right.
I have occasionally misjudged and started charging it a bit late, and then I can only get it up to 97 or 98, and it's time to go. But that's not a big deal.
And the 19.2 is not going to help you there because the top portion of the battery charges slowly on any battery.
Yeah.
And that's another kind of a drawback for the Cadillac Lyriq is I don't think it has a great charging curve. Reference our show last week if you don't know what that is. So it gets 76 miles in 10 minutes of charging, or 122 for a half hour of charging. So that's not great. That's 313 kilometers in 30 minutes or 195 miles. Which I'm going to say it over again. 18-20 minutes is my threshold. That's where I want to see highway charging to get from, I would accept 10 to 80%. So sometimes you'll see cars they'll say 5 to 80% next number of minutes. If that's around 20, I'm happy, depending on the car. Depending on
and when I did my road trip to Vancouver, I on the way there, I stopped at every supercharger. I didn't have to stop at every one, but just for the heck of it. And so most of my charging was 20 minutes or less.
And my other threshold is 2 hours and 45 minutes of highway driving. That's a good interval for me. It may not suit everyone, but that's, and if you could stop and top it up for 10, 15 minutes while you pee and get a drink and stretch your legs, because I'm going to be doing that anyway. I guess that's why 2 hours and 45 minutes. So, and the other big thing about this, Brian, is that it's only $59,990. So it's under $60,000 for a luxury, good size SUV. And apparently, the way it's EVs are often well equipped, as they say, even the base model. So sometimes the base model is not shouldn't be compared to the base model of a gas car because they have less in those. They have more models, more trim levels to talk about. So basically, what they're saying is this is a price parity with it's very similar to other Cadillacs that they're selling that are similarly equipped. So that's awesome. That's right now.
Yeah, well, it's all about battery production. They got to make enough batteries so they can get the price down. And it would seem like GM with their Ultium battery, I think it's LG is their partner with that. They're making a lot of batteries. VW is making a lot of batteries. So that's what's going to make all this possible.
Yeah. And batteries are now about a quarter of the cost of a car. So you're not going to see huge drops as the battery prices decrease. You might see some price improvements in other components for electric cars as they start making more of them and improve the manufacturing process and so forth. However, we're already kind of at parity, especially in the premium market, and we're hoping that comes down soon. So yeah, that's 190 kilowatts fast charging on the highway, but there are other cars that have that sort of speed of charging that do more in 30 minutes. Let's just put it that way. So that's where your charging curve comes in. 340 horsepower, 325 pound-feet of torque, and it's coming in Q1 of 2022. That's when they're starting the rollout. They're making them in Spring Hill, Tennessee, and people are happy with the bold styling. A lot of people are happy with the bold styling that has carried over from the concept, because a lot of times they'll have something really cool and wacky and interesting on the concept, and it doesn't make it to the production model. They chicken out. So that's the Cadillac Lyriq, your EV.
Yeah, no, I think it's a decent looking car, good specs, and that's not too far down the road, 2022.
The Clean Energy Show Lightning Round.
Wow, it's the lightning round. Brian, Toyota is to review its lobbying against climate and electric cars after pressure from investors. There's the blood pressure. It's going up again.
Yeah, but that's, I guess, the nice thing about having a publicly traded company is that you are beholden to your shareholders, and the shareholders finally got fed up. Look, Tesla, you're taking us down, Toyota, taking us down the drain here with your anti EV stuff. So yeah, so they're having to reconsider based on complaints from shareholders, which is kind of cool.
Toyota was famously one of the few automakers who sided with the Trump administration in their legal fight against California trying to impose their own stricter emission regulations, which made me mad because I own a Toyota, and I've owned a couple of them, and that made me angry, and I had to take my blood pressure. The Japanese didn't stop there, and more recently, it warned the new U.S. Federal government against promoting all-electric vehicles. The Japanese automotive company Toyota did not stop there. They went on and lobbied the government against electric vehicles. They are so anti-EV. They are really, truly the incumbent of auto industries more than what you might expect, because Ford and a lot of other people are actually doing things.
Yeah, as I think we've said before, I always was interested in the Japanese automakers because, just when you and I grew up in the 70s, when they were kind of the new players on the block and they came over to North America and really shook things up. But yeah, absolutely. They're now the entrenched incumbents, and they're the ones getting lapped by all the newcomers, including just, Hyundai and Kia. Like, Hyundai and Kia have eaten a lot of their lunch from the Japanese brands.
25 years ago, like I said, the GM rolled out the EV1, which is a triumph of electrification that ended in a crushing blow, literally crushing blow. But the car planted the seed for the industry to embrace EVs now. And yeah, do you agree that the EV1 planted a seed for where we are today for Tesla and everyone else to get on board?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, somebody had to come out with the first one. They did it. It was a pretty decent little car, but it absolutely showed what was possible. It was a small but sprightly little car, and the people who had them just loved it.
So Amazon is building a 30 megawatt solar farm in our neighboring province of Alberta to offset its emissions. Because they sort of have an open electricity market, it's easier for them to do that. Amazon is going to offset their emissions, and just like Google and other tech companies around the world, how they do that is they build solar and wind farms in various places and offset all the electricity they use and sell it into the various grids.
Yeah, and there was an Apple event yesterday, and they started it out by talking about their energy footprint. And I can't remember the exact promises, but they're already carbon neutral for like their management operations, but they have a plan to get to carbon neutral for their entire operations, including, manufacture and then end use of the products even. And I think maybe it was 2030 is their goal for that. I'd have to look it up, but and it just makes business sense too, as we've discussed many times. It's good economic policy to go with clean energy. It's going to save them money in the long run, as well as being, a good citizen.
So Fiat Electric GT, the new tech regulations in electric car racing, these are supercars, has announced a lightning fast 700 kilowatt charging speed. They haven't given the details on how that will work, but that is approximately almost 3 times the fastest that a Tesla can do. And it's interesting because sometimes race cars, in the real gas world, race car tech filters down into the cars that people buy. So I assume nothing would be different here. And so I don't know what they're up to, but I guess they have a motivation for getting faster charging at the pit stop. Tesla may produce 1 million cars in 2021. The supply order reveals. It sounds like there's hints and rumors going around that Tesla's going to sell a lot of cars this year, Brian.
Yeah, they've been sort of vague on their targets that they're releasing to the public, but it sounds like their internal target anyway is 1 million. They're hoping to do 1 million, which would be a doubling of what they did in 2020. So, they could make it. I mean, certainly 800 or 900,000, I think, seems quite doable. 1 million is maybe a bit of a stretch goal, but that's all they've been doing is increasing their capacity, opening up new plants. The Berlin and Texas factories will be, at least slightly open by the end of the year.
Yeah.
But they're just increasing capacity at a crazy, crazy rate.
Tesla's first office in India will be in Mumbai, report suggests. This isn't a rumor, it's a report, but it's a report that suggests something. So we'll take that with a grain of salt. Mazda presents in China its second electric car. Mazda is another company. What is it with Japanese automakers and electric cars? They're the most reluctant ones out there, and I don't understand that. I guess they haven't got the Tesla wave. The EV1 and the Tesla didn't affect them at all. Didn't get there. Biden plans to cut emissions. This is actually a big story. By at least half, and by the end of the next decade, compared to 2005 levels. In other words, he has increased his emission reductions goals by quite a bit. So he's continues to surprise if they can get this passed.
Well, and I think, I was alluding to this earlier in the program. Everybody can set these targets. Washington State can go ahead and say, no more gas cars by 2030. But, somebody has to create the supply. But once the supply starts ramping up, and it is ramping up for electric vehicles, for solar, for wind, for grid storage batteries, possibly as many as 40 million electric cars by 2035, if you believe the S curve of adoption. So, I don't know. I think a lot of these targets will be kind of continually updated and shortened and made sooner because it's going to be possible. There's just going to be the supply that makes earlier dates possible.
So they originally were shooting for 26 to 28%, and now it's at least 50% by 2030. So that's doubling, nearly doubling their targets. So with that ambition, unless they do absolutely nothing, put no money, put no resources into facilitating that happening, you have to think that whatever's happening now is going to get a boost from Biden. Let's put it that way. You have to admit that.
Yes.
Okay. You admit that.
I admit that.
And also the UK is targeting a 78% cut in greenhouse gas emissions by 2035, and it will include aviation and shipping. So the Tesla Model Y is outselling the Model 3 in California in Q1 2021. It was expected to happen. We were told by Elon that was going to happen, and now it's happening. No surprise there.
Yeah, the Model Y was always going to be more popular. They just had to be able to get the capacity to actually make more of them.
The U.S. is also, speaking of Joe Biden, Uncle Joe, we should get him on the show sometime. What do you say?
Yeah, sure.
Is proposing a 30% U.S. tax credit for e-bike purchases. And it is gaining support in Congress, which means people think it might actually happen.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think it was Dawn last week that was complaining about, how it's not EVs that are necessarily going to solve this problem, that e-bikes might be might be the way to go. And yeah, absolutely. Let's get more people into e-bikes.
So-called last mile transportation like scooters and mopeds. Yeah, a lot of transportation in India right now is two-wheeled transportation, and they make as much exhaust as a car or more because they have less regulations on them. So you make all of those electric. You have a more pleasant city. Can you imagine all those damn scooters out of tune that are driving around, and suddenly you replace them with electric ones, and it's suddenly a much more pleasant experience to breathe and sound. I love how EVs sound because they sound a lot better, and I don't like the noise of a bunch of loud cars echoing off of skyscrapers in my own city. So yeah, that's just one thing that I love about that. And yeah, I was watching last night some videos on YouTube about how on the pandemic certain jurisdictions, especially in Washington State, had closed off roads because they weren't getting used anyway, and then everybody went and bought bikes.
No, and we've talked about this before, is like scooters with swappable batteries. And I was just looking for it here. There was a recent story on Electrek. Battery swapping Gogoro announces partnership with world's largest motorcycle builder. And basically, yeah, scooters are the perfect vehicle probably to do battery swapping. It's maybe not so practical for cars, but scooters, you can have these handheld batteries. And so like Taiwan already has 2,000 battery swapping stations, another place where they have a lot electric scooters. So, electric bicycles and then, electric scooters with these swappable batteries. This could be absolutely huge.
And the more that happens, 2,000 stations with 50 batteries each, let's say, I mean, the more batteries go down in price, and it all snowballs, and it makes it cheaper for other people to do it, and then that expands, and it's incredible. Most people don't realize how fast things are changing, and that's kind of what our show is about, covering how fast the world is changing. And by the way, Brian, I didn't mention this last week. Did I tell you this? I had a Impossible Whopper.
I had one too.
Did you? How did you like it?
I liked it. Yeah, you'd mentioned it. And we happened to be in a rush one day. And I thought, hey, maybe I'll get that in case James wants to talk about it. But I think you were right. It was indistinguishable. I mean, there's so much other goop on there.
Yes, a lot of onions, a lot of lettuce and tomato and mayo.
Yeah, you absolutely do not need meat in a Whopper.
That's why they used to sell them to vegetarians without the burger patty. What's the difference? You're not really buying it for the burger patty. They don't. Unfortunately, I was going to tell you that they don't have them in the Whopper Juniors because that's normally what you order. It's just the Whopper, and I liked it. Yeah, I liked it. In fact, and it's a 10% upgrade cost, which isn't much, compared to the first plant-based patties that have been out at restaurants, and we expect that to go down, and you will have to pay a premium to get an actual beef burger. I predict within 5 years in Canada, where we live, you'll have to pay more for beef. And that, my friend, is going to affect agriculture, and people don't realize that. It's hard to predict exactly how that's going to play out and when it's going to play out, but I think it's going to play out. I think price disruption and the quality of these products will improve, and they'll be able to they'll create new products that we've never tasted before that taste better than beef. It's beefy, but it's better, and it gives you your protein for the day, and stuff like that.
Yeah, this is absolutely going to happen by 2030, which is, like you say, what the show's all about.
Yeah, and we're over time this week, Brian, but electric tractor manufacturer Solatrak announced that it has delivered its first compact electric tractor, which are CETs for short. They've got an abbreviation for them, which I love, which means they're real. In Oahu, Hawaii, the fully electric tractor was donated to the Kauahu Hawaii Foundation, a nonprofit. I faked my way through that, by the way. A nonprofit organization founded by musician Jack Johnson and his wife, Kim, that supports environmental education in the schools and communities in Hawaii, especially about sustainable practices. So, yeah, and electric tractors are here. And I've long said that electric tractors, great, because farmers have to store diesel on their farm, which gets stolen. You charge this up, and you got all your torque. You got independent moving wheels, perhaps. You like the new Humvee EV is going to have crab wheels. Well, God, no, I'm not a tractor expert, Brian. I'm not. Finally, Brian, this week, the Porsche Taycan sales surge as the electric vehicle becomes one of the most bought of the brand's cars. It's the most important car, becoming the most important car of Porsche, with 40,000 unit mark this year. It crushed the sales of the Panamera, and the Taycan's closest competitor in their lineup. It crushed the sales of it. And it's even approaching Porsche 911 sales. So this is really, beyond anyone's wildest expectations for Porsche. It is a nice car. It is my car of preference. If money were to grow on trees, especially the trees in my yard, I would go buy one. That would be, if money were no object, I think I would go buy a Porsche, because it's a good-looking car. I mean, it costs twice as much as a Tesla, but it's not twice as better, I would say.
Yeah.
But it charges fast, it's inefficient with the battery, but it's a gorgeous car, inside and out, I think.
Yeah, I would love one.
That's it this week, Brian. We'll see you again next week on the Clean Energy Show. Join us every Wednesday. Goodbye for now.
See you next week.